I was enjoying a sunny afternoon, sitting on a swing in our front yard. The warmth of the sun on my face made everything feel so peaceful. I remember kicking the ground slightly to keep the swing moving, letting the breeze play with my hair. That's when I noticed her for the first time. There was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, standing just behind me. She wore a yellow dress with red polka dots and frilly edges, and her dark, short hair framed her pale face. It wasn't unusual for kids to pass by the yard since our place wasn't fenced in, but there was something different about her. I gave her a friendly wave, calling out, "Hey, are you new around here?" She didn't answer. Her large brown eyes met mine for a brief second before she turned and ran away. There was something about the way she looked at me that sent a small shiver down my spine, but I quickly shrugged it off. Kids can be shy, I thought. For the next week, I saw her almost every day. She would appear at random times, always in that same yellow dress, always silent. No matter how many times I asked her name or where she lived, she never responded. She would just look at me, like she was trying to tell me something, but no words ever came out. One evening, as the sun began to set and shadows stretched across the yard, I saw her again, standing under the oak tree near the edge of the driveway. This time, her stare lingered a bit longer. There was something unsettling in her gaze, something that made me feel cold despite the warmth of the evening air. But again, just as I was about to approach her, she turned and disappeared behind the trees. By this point, I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. I wasn't sure what it was about the girl, but something about her presence was becoming more and more unnatural. After a week of seeing the little girl almost daily, I finally decided to mention her to my mom. We were sitting in the kitchen after dinner, the air still filled with the scent of home-cooked food. Casually, I brought up the strange girl I had been seeing in the yard. "Mom, there's this little girl who keeps coming around. She's about my age, maybe younger, with a yellow dress and short black hair. She never talks to me, though. Do you know her?" As soon as I finished describing her, my mom froze. The spoon in her hand clattered to the counter, and she stared at me like I had just said something that didn't make sense. Her eyes widened with an expression I'd never seen before, fear mixed with disbelief. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I repeated myself, a bit more cautiously this time. "The girl. She's always wearing the same yellow dress with red polka dots, and she's got short, dark hair. I've seen her almost every day this week." My mom's face turned pale. She mumbled something under her breath, something I could barely catch. It sounded like, "It can't be." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, Mom? What's wrong?" Without saying another word, my mom motioned for me to follow her. We walked down to the garage, where she started rummaging through an old cardboard box. Dust filled the air as she pulled out an old photo album, her hands trembling as she flipped through the yellowed pages. Finally, she stopped at a picture and handed it to me. I looked down at the photo, my breath catching in my throat. It was her, the little girl I had been seeing. Same yellow dress, same short black hair, same solemn expression. "That's your Aunt Lily," my mom said, her voice shaky. "She died when she was 7. She was buried in that dress." The air felt thick, suffocating. I stared at the picture, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. The girl I had been talking to, following around for days, had been dead for years. Why didn't you ever tell me about her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We don't talk about her much," my mom said, her voice cracking. "It's too painful. She was my little sister. She passed away in an accident." As I stood there, holding the photo, the room felt like it was spinning. Every encounter I'd had with the girl now seemed like something out of a nightmare, something impossible. Yet, I knew what I had seen. The rest of the evening after my mom's revelation was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about Aunt Lily, the girl I had been seeing for over a week. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was just my imagination or some strange coincidence. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. The next few days passed quietly. I didn't see the little girl again, and for a brief moment, I began to think it was all over. Maybe the whole thing had been some kind of hallucination brought on by a childhood imagination running wild. My mom even arranged for a mass to be said in Aunt Lily's memory, something that gave her peace. I wanted to believe that it had solved whatever strange connection there was between me and the ghost of my aunt. But then the small, unsettling things began to happen. One morning, as I was getting ready for school, I noticed my window was slightly open. It was odd, because I always made sure to close it before going to bed, especially since the nights had started getting cooler. Brushing it off as nothing, I closed the window and went about my day. But the next morning, it was open again, just a crack, enough for a cool breeze to slip through. I started hearing soft footsteps late at night, coming from the direction of the front yard. At first, I thought it was just animals passing through, but the footsteps were too deliberate, too human. Every time I looked outside, no one was there. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling the familiar sensation of being watched. I glanced toward the window, and there she was, standing just beyond the glass. Her face partially obscured by the darkness was the little girl in the yellow dress, Aunt Lily. Her eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. I gasped, my body freezing in place, unable to move or call for help. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, staring, before slowly turning and walking away into the night. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told my mom about what had happened, hoping she would have some explanation, something that could calm me down. But instead, she looked more worried than ever. "I think maybe she's trying to tell you something," my mom said, her voice barely audible. "Maybe she wants help." "Help with what?" I asked, confused and frightened. She's been dead for years. My mom didn't have an answer, but the fear in her eyes told me one thing. Aunt Lily wasn't gone, and whatever it was that kept her here wasn't going to let her rest. The days dragged on with a suffocating sense of unease. Every corner of the house seemed to hold some unspoken secret, as if Aunt Lily's presence had seeped into the very walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was always there, watching me, waiting for something. The idea of helping her, of figuring out what she wanted, terrified me even more. One evening, my mom sat me down at the kitchen table, her face pale with worry. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice low. "There's more to the story about Lily." My heart raced as she began telling me things I had never heard before, about how Aunt Lily had been a curious, adventurous girl, always wandering off to explore the neighborhood. One day, she didn't come home. They searched for her everywhere, and when they finally found her body, it was as if she had simply laid down to sleep. No signs of harm, no explanation. The dress she had been wearing, the same yellow dress with red polka dots I had seen her in, was spotless. "I was just a child when it happened," my mom said, her hands trembling as she spoke. "But I remember how strange it was, how quiet everything got after she died. My parents never spoke of it again." I sat there in silence, absorbing everything she had told me. It was like a puzzle with missing pieces, and Aunt Lily was one of those pieces that refused to fit neatly into place. The more I learned about her, the more restless I became. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what my mom had said. If Aunt Lily wanted help, why was she haunting me? What could I do for a ghost? Just as I was drifting off to sleep, a sudden noise jolted me awake. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping. I froze, my body tense. The tapping was coming from a window again, the same window where I had seen her standing just days ago. Slowly, I sat up and turned my gaze toward the glass. There she was, but this time, she was inside the room. Aunt Lily stood at the foot of my bed, her dark eyes staring into mine. The room was unnaturally cold, and I could see my breath in the air. Her yellow dress seemed almost to glow in the dim light, a stark contrast to the shadows that clung to her small frame. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was locked inside my throat, and all I could do was stare, wide-eyed and terrified. For a moment, she just stood there, and then she spoke. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but filled with an emotion I couldn't place. Desperation? Fear? Pain? My heart pounded in my chest. "Help you how?" I managed to choke out, my voice shaky, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned slowly, moving toward the door as if floating on air. I watched as she disappeared into the hallway, leaving me alone in the freezing room. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I couldn't. What did she want from me? How was I supposed to help her? The next morning, I knew there was only one person who might have the answers. The one person who had been there when everything happened. I needed to speak to my grandmother. There was something in the past, something that had been hidden for years, and now it was time to uncover it. Whatever Aunt Lily needed, whatever was keeping her here, it was tied to something no one had told me about, and I was determined to find out what it was. The drive to my grandmother's house was long and quiet, filled with a sense of dread that weighed heavily on my chest. My mom was hesitant about the visit, but understood that I needed answers. She, too, was shaken by everything that had happened, and while she didn't say much, I could see the fear in her eyes. When we arrived, my grandmother greeted us warmly, but there was an air of tension in the room that hadn't been there before. It was as if the past, long buried and forgotten, was slowly creeping back to the surface. After some small talk, I finally gathered the courage to ask her about Aunt Lily. "Grandma," I said, my voice trembling, "I need to know what really happened to Aunt Lily. I've been seeing her, and I think she needs help." Her face paled, and for a moment, I thought she might refuse to answer. But then she sighed deeply, her expression a mix of sadness and exhaustion. I suppose it was only a matter of time before this all came back, she said softly. You see, Lily wasn't just a curious little girl. There was something else, something darker. I leaned in, my heart pounding. This was the truth I had been searching for, the piece of the puzzle that had been missing all along. She had a fascination with death, my grandmother continued, her voice barely a whisper. It started with small things, animals she found in the yard, insects she would catch and keep in jars. At first, we thought it was just a phase, but as she got older, it became more disturbing. She would disappear for hours, wandering off to who knows where. My mom and I exchanged uneasy glances. This was far from the picture of Aunt Lily we had imagined. Then one day, she came home with a strange object, my grandmother said, her eyes distant as if recalling a memory she had long tried to forget. It was an old, weathered box. She said she found it near the woods, but I never believed her. There was something off about it, something that felt wrong. I swallowed hard. What was inside the box? She hesitated before answering, as if the very memory of it caused her pain. Bones. Tiny, fragile bones. And something else. A small piece of jewelry. A pendant shaped like a crescent moon. A cold chill ran down my spine. This was no ordinary discovery. Something more sinister was at play. Something connected to Aunt Lily's death and the strange things I had been experiencing. We tried to get rid of it, but Lily wouldn't let us. She became obsessed with that box, carrying it with her everywhere, my grandmother said, her hand shaking slightly. And then, just a few days later, she disappeared. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Do you think the box had something to do with her death? I don't know, my grandmother admitted. But after she died, we found the box again. It was in her room, under her bed, and inside there was something new. A lock of hair. Blonde hair. My breath caught in my throat, but Lily had black hair. My grandmother nodded. Exactly. A heavy silence settled over the room as the implications of her words sank in. There was something deeply wrong with that box, something tied to Aunt Lily's death, and perhaps to the strange things I had been seeing. But before I could ask more, my grandmother reached for my hand. There's one more thing, she said, her voice trembling. After Lily's funeral, I buried the box in the backyard. I thought that if I hid it, if I put it somewhere far away from the house, it would be over. But now, I'm not so sure. I knew what I had to do. Whatever had been haunting Aunt Lily, whatever had caused her to reach out to me, it was connected to that box. And if I wanted to help her, if I wanted to end this once and for all, I had to find it. Later that night, my mom and I went to my grandmother's house again. We brought shovels, flashlights, and a determination to uncover the truth. As we stood in the backyard, the moon casting eerie shadows over the grass, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We dug for what felt like hours, the sound of metal scraping against earth filling the silence. And then, finally, we hit something solid. I knelt down, brushing the dirt away, and there it was, the box, just as my grandmother had described. Old, weathered, and covered in dirt, but unmistakably the same. I hesitated before opening it. a part of me terrified of what I might find inside. But I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As I lifted the lid, the air around us seemed to grow colder. Inside, I saw the bones, just as my grandmother had described. And there, nestled among them, was the pendant, the crescent moon, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. But there was something else, something new. A small piece of paper, folded neatly. I picked it up, my hand shaking, and unfolded it. The message was simple, yet chilling. Set me free. In that moment I understood. Aunt Lily had been trapped, not just by death, but by something far darker, something that had followed her from the day she found that box. With trembling hands, I took the pendant and threw it into the fire we had built nearby. The flames roared to life, and as the pendant melted away, I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of relief. The air around us seemed to lighten, and for the first time in days, I felt as though the weight of Aunt Lily's presence had lifted. It was over. She was finally free. As we stood there, watching the fire burn, I couldn't help but wonder what else might be out there. What other stories, like Aunt Lily's, were waiting to be uncovered. But for now, at least, the haunting was over. Or so I hoped. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.